Hi everyone, welcome to the Women Techmakers Give Back series, episode 2. Today we're excited to have Jennifer Palka here with us in studio, the founder and executive director of Code for America. And before we turn it over to Jen, let me quickly introduce myself and my host Chris. I'm Lacey Carruthers. I'm on the Google Giving team, and our focus is on identifying and supporting innovative nonprofits that are using technology to change the world. And I've been at Google for about 6 years, working across a variety of our energy and sustainability as well as our giving efforts. And I'm joined today by Chris Sabona, my co-host.
Hi, I'm Chris. I look after open source for the company, and I've helped out the Giving team now and then over the last couple of years. I started at Google in 2004, which I guess we're telling people. And yeah, and I'm just happy to be here. I've known Jen since Gov 2.0. But we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
We will.
So, yeah.
Great. So now we'll turn it over to Jen to introduce yourself.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you guys so much. I always love coming down to Google. I've been looking forward to this all week. So I founded this organization called Code for America, and we call ourselves a Peace Corps for geeks. I have a background, as Chris alluded to, in tech media. And it was through this Gov 2.0 work that where I originally met Chris that I kind of came inspired by the notion that geeks can really do something to fix our country right now. There's a really high need for it. And we're at this sort of interesting moment where there's a real opportunity to do something. A lot of conditions that have been holding us back are changing. And so I created this program. Well, we actually do a number of things now, but the main thing that we do is a service year program. And so we get very talented developers and designers. In fact, one in our just past year was from Google, Michelle Lee, to take a year off. And what they do is they work very closely with city governments around the country. And they're building apps, they're showing them lean startup processes, they're showing them modern tools. But what they're really doing is solving problems for cities and showing how things can be done, showing what's possible with modern technology. And all sorts of amazing things happen when you really deeply engage with people who are living in a little bit of a different technological world right now, giving them the exposure to how a startup would solve a problem, how the tech industry would solve a problem, and letting them understand that they can do that themselves. So we just had a fantastic time in our first couple of years trying out this model and seeing what happens when you put geeks together with government.
So tell us about some of the projects that your fellows have worked on.
So this year we actually worked with 8 cities. It's our second year, I should say. We started out our first year, 2011, we worked with 3 cities and pretty quickly scaled up to 8. I'll tell you about one example, and I think we can pull it up there if you want to go to the Blight Status app. We were asked to come to New Orleans. We sent a team of 4 fellows there. And the problem there, which is not surprising to a lot of people, that they wanted us to work on is blight. Blight's actually a problem around the country. It's not just Hurricane Katrina. That's what most people think of. But as our populations change in cities where there has been manufacturing and people have left, you have a real issue. And it affects the economic development, affects the quality of life for people in neighborhoods. So the mayor of New Orleans had asked the CIO there, why can't I just pull up on my laptop or my device when I'm walking around the city what's going on with these properties that are obviously blighted? We don't know if they've been inspected, if they've been reported, if there's been a hearing. And there wasn't a way to get that data available to people. Now, there are huge numbers of people in New Orleans who spend, really, you'd be shocked, enormous amounts of time tracking these things and going after City Hall and saying what's going on here. But there was no unified view of the data around these things. And so the CIO said to the mayor, well, it's going to take us 3 years and probably millions of dollars to upgrade all of our systems in order to be able to have a view of that data.
Or tens of millions.
He didn't say a number, but if you're talking about 3 years of government development, it's pretty expensive. It tends to be a lot more expensive in the public sector. So we had this wonderful woman, Denise Ross, who said, you know what, let's see if the Code for America fellows can do something about this. So they applied to the program the previous year, and we sent fellows down there this recent February. They did about 100 interviews in 1 month down there. And just, not just people in City Hall. They're talking to these activists in the neighborhoods. They're talking to librarians. They're talking to cops. They really get an amazing view from all perspectives of the problem. they came back to San Francisco, and in 6 weeks, they had an early version of what you're seeing here, this blight status. They got all the data. It wasn't that hard for them. It was the hardest part was getting the data. They unified it. You can now type in any address in New Orleans, and you get back whether it's been reported, inspected, if there's been a hearing, if it's scheduled for demolition, and if so, when. And that doesn't seem like the most difficult project in the world, but convincing the people in City Hall to give you the data is difficult. Normalizing all this data that's in ridiculously different formats. Some of them were spreadsheets, some of them were ledgers, some of them were government databases that they've been using. But it was a lot of work that's not all technical work, but the impact was enormous. I mean, when they rolled this out in New Orleans, they told the fellows, you have fundamentally changed the conversation in New Orleans right now. We've gone from this defensive City Hall and angry citizens to two groups that are now working together towards a common goal. And it's just been amazing. And the CIO was very happy. He stood up on the stage at our summit and he said, "I'm so glad I was wrong about this. This isn't. Yes, they still need to upgrade their systems, but that's not an excuse not to provide accurate data to citizens and to provide it in. I think what's unique about this when you look at these interfaces is that most government software doesn't have interfaces like this. So we call these interfaces to government that are simple, beautiful, and easy to use." And that's part of our message, not just to the developer community and the government community, but to citizens. You should expect to have interfaces to government that are simple, beautiful, and easy to use. And society really fundamentally changes when we have those interfaces.
Yeah, I think you might have mentioned this at the summit, but was this made generalizable for another city, like say a Detroit, or pick another blight-stricken city?
Yeah, this one in particular is a little bit hard to generalize because every city has their own kind of mess of data on the back end. But all the apps that the fellows build are open source. So some of them are, you can just pretty easily re-implement. Maybe we could talk about Adopt a Hydrant, which is an example of that. Others will require a fair amount of work on the part of the city to reuse it. But everything is built with the intention that we're not going to solve a problem only one city has, because we want to see cities adopt a really new model where they're not just going to vendors and saying, build this at high cost to taxpayers, but how can we shop from each other's closets? How can we use the solutions that have been already implemented? And in fact, the New Orleans team, I'm so proud of these guys. They are one of the 3 teams that are coming out of this year at the end of 2012 who are going through an incubator with us. They are taking this. They already have a contract with the city of New Orleans to continue working on it. They've got other cities interested, so they're taking it and making it really a commercial product. And they just didn't want to stop doing what they were doing, so they're going to get paid to do it now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. So you spent a great majority of your career in the games industry and then later running Web 2.0. So tell us about how your career evolved and how you ended up launching Code for America and what sparked that change.
Extremely accidentally. Yeah, I have the craziest career path because I came out to San Francisco after college to work in nonprofits, and I hated them. And now I run one, so go figure. I took a job working actually first initially on the software development conference back in 1994 with really no technical understanding at all. I had no idea what anybody was talking about for the first several months on the job. And I had been traveling around Southeast Asia. I needed a job and they hired me. It was like no interest in the subject. But I had gone from this sort of top-down structure in a nonprofit, which not so much fun, to landing very accidentally in first the software development world, which was more interesting, and then the world of game developers circa 1995. And as much as I was lost, I was finally so happy because it was this crazy, creative, incredibly smart community of people who were doing things that people really didn't largely understand, or the general populace didn't understand, sort of right before games broke out to be really mainstream. And I think that what ties that to sort of what I'm doing now is just, it was such a transformative time for me to understand what the technology world was. I mean, I had been an American Studies major in college, and technology was something I felt like I didn't understand. And it was really the people and the creativity and the sort of magic of development that just it completely enraptured me. I had an amazing time. That conference was very small when we started it, and when I left, it was, I think, 12,000 people. But it really just gave me a love for what developers can do, and that carried on. Then I left that after I had my kid. I came back and was working on Web 2. It was the same thing. It was like 2005, Web 2.0 was just when all of this amazing stuff was happening, and you really felt like you were at the center of something that was being created, that was transforming the world. And that really led into, I think, this notion that the talent, not just the talent, but I think the spirit of those communities had a lot to offer this system that we all rely on called government, which just needs, government has many amazing, wonderful people, as you know, Chris. But it's just stuck in a lot of old ways, and it needs to be a creative force, not just a sort of a stagnant bureaucratic force. So I think that really informed this idea of Code for America.
One of the really refreshing things I found about Code for America is you didn't go into cities and governments and say, you're all broken. You didn't go in, we're going to fix it. You were like, hey, how can we help? What would be something that would be really useful? And I think that, your first year was kind of figuring out that process. I mean, would you like to talk more about that? Because I know that was a really tricky time for you guys.
Oh yeah, it was great though. It was in some ways sort of the best year. Definitely one thing we found is that I think we were so lucky to get that particular class of fellows that year. There was just something about them. I mean, you had to be pretty brave to do the program. We had no track record. It was not clear that we would be able to pay people. And
our donation didn't come until after that first year,
that's right. It was very, month to month. And it was just like, the first month, we started with 3 cities, Boston, D.C.
Portland?
4. So it was Boston, Philadelphia, and Seattle. But originally there was a 4th. We had a 4th team that was deployed to Washington, D.C. And what happened is we got our assigned contract there right before Fenty lost the election and Mayor Gray came in. And we were talking to the new people. Actually, it was the old people who hadn't been fired yet. And they said, no, it's fine. Send the fellows. It'll be fine. The fellows show up on the first day of work in D.C. They get their badges and they get assigned seats, and they're getting walked around the office in the way that people do on their first day. And they're about to go to lunch, and the general counsel comes over with security, and they escort them from the building. So there was
welcome to DC.
We had a reasonable idea that this might happen just from sort of the signals. So they went to Clay Johnson's place. I said, "Don't worry, I got a place for you."
I got a friend.
Actually, they called in for their first check-in meeting with me, and I was very clear they were not calling from an office. I said, "Where are you?" They're like, "We're in the National Portrait Gallery." It was cold out on the street. So anyway, lots of chaos the first year. But I think to actually answer your question,
what ended up happening to that team? I gotta figure that out.
They worked on the Civic Commons project. We now call the CFA Commons, which is really a way that you can kind of see a lot of these civic technology projects, see where they're in use, and be able to get a sense of what's working where in terms of mostly open source civic tech. But to get back to the thing, those fellows were amazingly emotionally intelligent, and they were humble, and they were curious, and they were kind. And so I think when people heard about the idea, and we had this video that we used to promote Code for America the very first year that had Mark Zuckerberg and Katarina Fake and Biz Stone in it. And I think people thought we were going to be like, hi, we're here from the cool part of the internet, and we're going to fix you.
We're going to make you cool, too.
We're going to make you cool, too.
We're going to give you a little more cool. We're going to sprinkle cool on
you. We know how it's done. And the fellows showed up, and they were
old government people.
They were so nice, and they were disarming. And I think not to slag on consultants, but I think in government, they're so used to having like McKinsey and other consulting companies come in and like, okay, we've got a process, we know what's going on. And these guys came in, they were like, hi, we're so excited to be here. Could I help you do anything? And it just set the tone. It set the tone of like a real collaboration from the beginning. And so, thank God.
So for those folks that are tuning into this and are interested in being a fellow with Code for America, what types of folks are you looking for?
That's a great question. So the name is Code for America, but really about 2/3 of our fellows code, somewhere between half and 2/3. We're also looking for great designers, graphic designers, user experience designers.
Your woman participation for the fellows was actually pretty amazing last year when I last saw the slate.
Last year we had 26 fellows overall, and 12 of them were women, so just one shy of half, which is good. And a number of them actually, engineers, and a number of various flavors of designer, and we actually really have a very diverse group of fellows. So some of them have some technical skills, but their background is city planning or law, and what you really have to show is a high degree of skill, the emotional intelligence to do a job like this, and passion, right? We want people who really, really care about what we're trying to do. And when you pay, a very small stipend for a year and you're supposed to live in San Francisco, you really only get people who are passionate about it. So it's a little bit of a filtering thing. But we'll be opening up. Our current class is 28 fellows, so they'll be starting January 3rd, but we'll start recruiting again for 2014 soon. And if anybody out there is interested in, we can always hook you up with fellows who've done the program. They can tell you really honestly, what it was like, and they've all been really positive about it. 2 years in a row now, basically every single fellow has said, this was hard, it wasn't everything I expected, but I would totally do it again. And they grew and they made great friends and they learned something. So we've been pleased.
And so, in addition to the Fellows Program, you guys also have an accelerator, a Civic startup accelerator. So tell us more about that.
Yes, thanks to Google.org. So one of the things we see is that the fellows go into these cities and they're exposing people in government to things like cloud-based applications and services that cost a lot less than what these guys are used to paying and have much better interfaces. And what happens is, and also I would say in sort of a hacker way, right? What happens is we create a lot of demand. Then they kind of go look at what the tool set they currently have and they go, wow, why are we paying so much for this? And couldn't we start to buy things in a different way? And there is now something of an ecosystem in the civic space that you would call sort of 2.0, or I don't know what the right term is there. But there's not enough, right? There need to be more smart entrepreneurs and developers and hackers and designers that say, I'm not just going to go try to do my Facebook killer or whatever. I'm going to solve a real problem for our country, for government, for citizens, whatever, and offer these kinds of services, targeted at the real needs the government has. So if we're going to succeed in our mission long term, we have to build that ecosystem. And we wanted to, pick some companies that were already trying to do this. We set out a call for applications, and everyone said there's no such thing as a civic startup. Who's going to apply? Except you guys. You were great. We had 235 companies apply for the accelerator.
How big were they? Small team?
It really varied. All over the map. We chose 7 of them, and they were all pretty small, but they ranged from Mind Mixer, which already has something like 250 city government clients, to Recovers.org, very early stage, fantastic application that's been in the media a lot because they were able to respond to Hurricane Sandy. They helped communities organize online for all the aid that's coming in after a disaster, and they were in very high demand at the end of October. So these companies they're just fantastic, and they're it's a real market. There's an enormous amount of money in this market. We're spending something like $172 billion a year.
You personally?
Yeah, no. Yes, us together personally. Yeah. Taxpayers are, and for a point of comparison, the video game business is now about 10 to 15 billion. So this is giant. I'm not saying you should go take a piece of a $172 billion market. I'm saying we should be cutting that number in half. But that's still a big business, and it's doing something to make your country better.
So speaking of mentorship and the mentorship you guys provide in your accelerator, going to your personal background, who have been your role models and your heroes as you've come on this path as a woman in tech?
Yeah, it's been interesting because I'm a woman in tech, but I'm not really a developer. I have big.
So you hate developers?
I hate developers. No, I mean I feel really strongly that that we need to fix this problem of fewer women in the industry. I'm not answering your question, but I'll get back to it. I mean, I have my niece came out. She's to spend the summer at Code for America 2 years ago, and I was like, she'll hang out with all these developers for the summer, and she'll get the coding bug, and I want that for her because I see the kind of life you can have, the kind of things that you can do, and I think increasingly it's about access to power in this country. So I really think it's important, and I'm connected to a lot of those efforts. And I just want to see more role models for women in technology. My role models have been like, my parents. I'm sorry to say it, but you grow up and you look.
Sorry to hear it.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. My dad's a teacher, and my mom's a nurse midwife, and they both. I think later in life you kind of realize how they've influenced you. They both care deeply about those systems, right? Our healthcare system has to work for us to live well in this country. Our education system has to work. Both of those are deeply broken. And they're the kind of people who worked way harder than anyone expected them to work because they cared so much about doing the right thing. And I think as I've thought about it later, sort of this turn into government, which seemed really unlikely for me, had to do with growing up in a household of people who cared about the public sector. But in the tech world, I think Sheryl Sandberg's done a lot to forward this conversation and to say really specific, brave things about women in the workplace. And I'm just really impressed with that. But she's not the only one. I think there's a lot of people who are standing up and saying, "I'm happy to kind of have this honest dialogue about women in tech."
Yeah. And so, what would to those young people, especially the young women that are interested in pursuing this path, what would your advice be to them?
I think that what I would say is, I just sort of set up this whole big thing about how there need to be more women in tech, but the truth is, if you're not coming at it from a place of just really, feeding your own passions, it's not the right thing. I think it's tap into what really jazzes you about what you're doing. And I think a lot of women get, the government technology space, I think, can be great for women for a lot of reasons. But one is that I see women really wanting to solve a particular problem, right? It's not just tech for tech's sake. And that's a place where you can do it really clearly, and people come tell you, you've had an impact on my life because of this application that you put up. But I think it's just sort of own your own career path, own your own passions, own what you want to do in tech, and that'll be the best role model for others, in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go to a city and you talk to them, do you go in and say, I want to do this to Detroit, I'd love to do this to Louisiana,
Yeah.
And then do you find yourself disappointed? Do you find yourself energized? What happens when you have those first discussions, especially in the first year? I mean, where your hopes and thoughts just dash upon the rocks and then recover? I mean,
we don't really go in and tell them what we want to do.
But I mean, in the back of your mind, you have this idea of a digital city, or how did that hit you?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a couple applications in my mind that I'd like to have built, and we're just not there yet. I mean, it's early stages in this industry, and I would say in this movement, right? So, more important than building any one thing that might be the thing you think will get everybody on board with, reporting issues in your city or being involved with civic life, is just again showing what's possible. Offering new models to approach problems in. So if we come in and say we want to do this, they don't own it, right? They have to say, we're starting to get that there might be a different way to solve this problem than the way we've solved it in the past. Mm-hmm. Can you help us prove that point? and it's very responsive. In fact, I talked about New Orleans, where they knew really clearly, like, this is the problem. Clearly the biggest thing in the city, clearly an opportunity where tech can, be a small intervention that changes the conversation. But we went into Honolulu, they said, we don't care what the fellows do. Like, we pushed them, like, what's their, area? Can you give us schools? What is it? They're like, we don't care. Have them come and spend a lot of time talking to people, and they can tell us what they want to do during the year. And we were a little nervous about that, but the folks in City Hall in Honolulu were fantastic. And they ended up doing this amazing project that actually it just won an Interaction Design Award. There's actually, I think we pulled up a screenshot of this too. It's called Honolulu Answers. So I'll tell that story.
Yeah, I do.
So
it was just in one.
Yeah. So by the way, love Honolulu. So
that's a rough place to have to work.
It really is. I know. I was supposed to visit all of the cities last February, and I ended up visiting just Honolulu.
We won't tell anyone.
Look at you. I know.
It was really great. One thing is you think of it as Hawaii, like beaches. It's a real city. It's giant. Mm-hmm. It has traffic problems. We're talking about a real American city, but on a beach, and it's beautiful. Anyway, so the fellows went to Honolulu, and one of the things they heard consistently from everyone, and I'm not just talking about people outside of government being critical, but people in government, was that the website not really serving citizens. And if you look at honolulu.gov, you'll see, and it's still up there. It's just not the information that you want. And what they did is they went and they looked at the search logs, and they said, when people come to honolulu.gov, what are they trying to do? And the top search result, for instance, was driver's license, which doesn't make sense to those of us that live in a state where the state handles driver's licenses. In Honolulu, the city does, or it's actually a city and county. So they type driver's license into honolulu.gov, and you get back about 25 different pages of information about driver's licenses. Never do you get back a page that tells you how to get a driver's license. But there's a lot of information, a lot of words. So what they did was they ripped off an interface that's sort of starting to be popular now in government that the UK has done and Utah.gov has done, which is basically a big, beautiful, background screen and a search box. So instead of trying to push a bunch of information, what is it you're trying to do? And they created custom content for those top 10 searches, driver's license and the other ones. So it's a simple, beautiful, easy to use interface that actually does what you want it to do. But then they had the problem of how are they going to create the rest of the content, and they held something that's not a hackathon. They held something called a write-a-thon, first ever write-a-thon. They got 60 people in Honolulu, citizens, people in government, across the board, to come together on a Saturday, and they put all the next set of questions up on the board, and people came and took them down and wrote clear, plain language answers to the next 50 most commonly asked questions in Honolulu, and they continue to do that. And so basically it's now growing on its own as a replacement to honolulu.gov that is frankly just a lot better at actually serving citizens' needs. And we had no idea that's what they were going to do. It worked out great.
That's true. Well, one thing that was really interesting to me is the first year you had the hydrant app.
Yeah.
And then you said it's recently migrated to a whole new kind of app for a different city, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, that story was amazing. So, and it's part of the Honolulu story too. 2011, our first year, one of the we sent all these fellows to Boston in the winter, which was...
That's dedication.
Yeah, and they were mostly from California and didn't have warm coats, and they also didn't have ties, and they were in City Hall. These are some of the things we learned the first year. That also happened to be the year of snowpocalypse. So they were in City Hall.
Don't they have those every year now?
No, there was no snow last year, hardly any, and there's not that much this year either, which you'll hear is actually a bummer for us. We needed more snow to test the app. So they're in City Hall when everybody is talking about trying to plow the streets. The dialogue in City Hall becomes all about what streets are plowed. And what they realize is, when you plow a street and the snow gets pushed up to the side, it covers the fire hydrants so that you can't find them or use them in the event of an emergency. Very little thing, but Eric Michaels Ober, one of the fellows, said, well, let's just see. I'm going to write a very quick little app that'll let you adopt a fire hydrant, because people are on the street, they're shoveling out the sidewalks in front of their houses. Why don't they take the extra step and shovel out the fire hydrant so that it's available if their house catches on fire? Sort of trivial little app that didn't get used that first year because they took a month to sort of roll it out, and then it wasn't snowing anymore. But great concept. And then when we had the second set of cities, our 2012 cities, come visit us that fall in preparation for being in the program the next year, our great partner, this guy Forrest Frizzell in the IT department in Honolulu, tells me, I was poking around on your GitHub account, and I found this thing called Adopt a Hydrant, and I'm going to use it in Honolulu. And we're like, not a lot of snow.
Sand drifts after a big surf.
Little strange. They said, no, I'm repurposing it as Adopt a Siren. And people steal the batteries out of these tsunami sirens on the beach. Also, big public hazard. You need to know if there's a tsunami coming to hit. And so that was the first reuse of it, which I think was just brilliant. I mean, no one had said to him, here's this thing, you could use it for this. He just got it and did it. And now a bunch of the sirens are adopted in Honolulu, which is great. But I think it's in about 8 or 9 cities right now already. So Oakland, where I live, just rolled it out as adopted storm drain. If you think about it, why are we spending a lot of money having crews go around and clear the leaves out of storm drains? I live right in front of I live a couple doors down from the storm drain on our block, and if it gets stuck with leaves, I can pull the leaves out just as well as a municipal worker. So I've adopted the storm drain on my street.
Do you ever have anyone accuse you of trying to subvert the authority of the government with these projects?
No, actually no. But I will say it's a little weird to put your hand in a storm drain. I'm getting over it, but you're like, ew.
You ever gone inside them and watched them?
No, they're just like this. You can't.
No, that's the above ground part.
Oh, maybe like.
Especially like
yeah.
in the cities.
Yeah. No, I haven't.
It's fun.
I'll put that on the life list.
Don't do that. Just for the record.
Okay.
Well, you're not endorsing that.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
So you want everyone else not to do it, but you want me to do it?
No. I want no one to do it.
Okay,
but
I
it's
won't.
Interesting. Anyway,
right.
but yeah.
Anyway, so you can, and by the way, this is an app that's pretty easy to stand up in other cities, and one of the other programs that we have is called this Brigade, which basically means that you don't have to take a year off and come work with us to code for America or do civic apps. You could, right now, wherever you live, go to your city government and say, hey, can I stand up this thing? Give me the locations of all the park benches or whatever, and I'll stand this up for you, and then we'll get citizens to start lending a hand, and just do it. It's not that hard.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask, what have you guys seen after? I know you've just had a couple of years of fellows, but what have you seen after the fellows have left these cities? Is there, are they leaving some kind of legacy? Have you seen the programs continue once they've gone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. That really is the point of the program, is that, if we come in and sort of do magic and then leave, what's really why? So increasingly we're kind of figuring out what are those changes that mean that there's a long-lasting difference in the city. And I think, there's a bunch of signals that things have changed, and there's no indicator on the wall that you can look at that says, culture change in government, now 25% complete.
Well done.
Well done. But you can see, like in Honolulu, Honolulu Answers is a Rails app, so they taught the staff Rails. I mean, that's not something you see that often.
Right.
There's a bunch of developers who actually do Rails now. You see things like policies being changed around, generally around openness, open data, open government. You see people who had been previously marginalized now sort of having the limelight, having more power, getting promotions, getting more resources. That's really common because they go, oh, that guy who was...
That's what you do.
Yeah, that guy who was saying all these crazy things we didn't understand, now we understand what he or she was saying, and we get that this could be valuable. And that's great because you really want it to come from inside. You want to take all that, internal, great spirit and it's like people who work in City Hall, they're also regular people. I mean, they have Android phones. Like they know they know how it is in the rest of the world. Exactly. It's not like that.
I was in government for a while.
You were what? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, it's even the people in government will eventually, start to say bad things about bureaucracy. But, really, it's not immutable. It really isn't. It takes people who care and sort of see something better to change it. And, we see that. It's really, really gratifying and exciting.
So one thing, just shifting gears a little bit, that my team thinks a lot about and has seen on the giving side is a huge opportunity for nonprofits to really leverage technology and integrate it into the work that they're doing. And so I think you guys are a great example. You're not only kind of innovating on within the government space, but also within the nonprofit space. So could you just talk a little bit about your experience there and what you have seen from the inside of that sector, and if there is kind of an emerging trend in that space?
Of the nonprofit sector?
Of the nonprofit sector, using and taking advantage of technology in better ways.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I've seen that much of the nonprofit sector now. I mean, I really spent a lot of time in government, and I'll tell you what I want out of the nonprofit sector is fewer emails. I think it's sending a bunch of emails advocating for things is useful, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on. But ultimately, technology can do something a lot more fundamental, a lot more powerful, and I think that there's a fair amount of the nonprofit sector that's stuck in the, we lobby and we educate and we send, we used to send enormous amounts of direct mail, and now we send enormous amounts of email. And I think, one of the things I think that set us apart, and you were kind to say this when you first sort of looked at us, like we write real code that does something other than send you an email. And I think all nonprofits should start looking at, what they can do and get beyond this notion of engagement, where engagement means they clicked on the link in the email, right? I'd had one guy come to me last year and say he wanted to do a Code for America for nonprofits to try to get them to think more innovatively about government. And I would say, he didn't do it. Someone else should. Take it up. It's a great opportunity. There needs to be more true innovation, not like better MailChimp.
We've run some hackathons for nonprofits, and it's always really surprising how underdeveloped their system is.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because they also see, when you talk to a lot of nonprofits about technology, they're coming at you with like, our server doesn't work. I mean, they're really at a very operational level around it, and you kind of want to go, I totally hear you, but we need to get those basic needs met so you can move forward. Yeah. And it's a resource issue. We need to resource them better.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have time for about one more question. That's right. Any burning questions, Chris? Let's see, last one. Let's see. I guess maybe just concluding with any final words you have to share with, as a woman in tech, given that this is the Women Techmakers series, maybe some of the best advice that you've ever gotten that's helped you in your career.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was supposed to have a good answer for this.
Or just final parting words.
I think the best advice I would give is that you get a lot of advice and it all conflicts, and in the end...
You get asked about it a lot.
In the end, you can't... If you close your ears off, you're doing yourself a great disservice. But if you try to take it all, you will become psychotic. And, I actually think that, I think people from outside the tech industry often look at me as like, oh, you're a woman in tech, let's talk about that. And my response to them is, tech is actually, yes, I get that there is a real gender divide here, but is actually a pretty, in most parts of the tech industry that I see, are pretty open and welcoming to women. And I don't think, I do think it's important to talk about the places where the industry becomes very unfriendly. And I don't think people get what they're doing, and I think a little education can help them when they're being very off-putting. But I think it's also important to talk about the places that are incredibly supportive. I mean, Code for America is, I think, a pretty supportive place for women. We've talked about issues that have come up from time to time. But there are great opportunities, and I think if we frame this as a place where you're going to be, fighting through a jungle all the time to get any respect, not only does that help us, but you know what? I worked in the media industry for a long time. I've worked in a bunch of industries. Sexism is not unique to the tech industry. Has anyone been anywhere else lately? So it's not. I don't think it's particularly that much worse in tech. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think I would like women to see it as fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jen. That was really fascinating. Thanks for sharing.
You should tell us the URL and where people can find your code, because that was someone asked about that.
URL. Yes. We're at codeforamerica.org, and we would love to see you all there. Signal your interest in being a fellow or in getting your city on board with our program. Or contributing to our annual campaign. And then if you would like to look at some of our code,
which is all open source.
We have too many repos. That's the feedback we're going to get. We're going to be cleaning it up this December, which is halfway over. Yeah. We are at github.com/codeforamerica. And go play. We have some great projects there. We'd love to see people get involved.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to the second episode in our Women Techmakers for Good series. We'll be here tomorrow as well at the same time, 2:30 Pacific Standard Time, with Sasha Landy of Codecademy.
Which is a terrific site if you haven't tried it out.
So stay tuned to learn more about women innovating in the tech space for good.